So this is going to be my review of the movie The Many Saints of Newark, and it's going to be a spoiler review, so if you don't want any spoilers for The Many Saints of Newark, stop watching the video now. But that being said, there's not really a lot to spoil because nothing happens in this movie whatsoever. Or I should say a lot of things happen, but it means absolutely nothing. Nothing has any consequences from the previous thing that happened. Things just happen and it means absolutely nothing. This is the most pointless movie that has ever been made, and I'm so disappointed. Now, if you're finding my channel because of this video, this is not my usual content. I've never done a movie review ever. My content is mainly about like Catholicism and conspiracy theories and stuff, but I'm a huge fan of The Sopranos and I've been looking forward to this movie all year, and I am just so disappointed. I don't want to over exaggerate how bad this movie is, but it's one of the worst things that has ever happened to America. It's like World War II, 9/11, women's rights, and The Many Saints of Newark. And I posted on my Telegram right after I finished the movie. I was like, The Many Saints of Newark was straight trash. I'm so disappointed. And a bunch of people were like, why? Is it paused? Was there a bunch of like left-wing agenda stuff going on in there? I was like, no, that's not why I didn't like it. It had nothing to do with that. Though there was a part where I thought it was going to get kind of paused because the Italian girl cheats on her boyfriend with a black guy, and I was like, oh, they're going to make the black guy cuck the white guy or something, and that's what the movie's going to be about. But it wasn't that at all. After they were done, she was like, Italians are better in bed or something like that, and I was like, oh, okay, so I guess this is not what the movie is about because now you're just laughing about it. And that's a common theme I'll get to, but it has nothing to do with political or social agenda pushing in the movie at all. And even movies that are super paused like that, if they're good movies, I can still appreciate the storytelling or the acting or the good aspects in spite of its cuckiness. Like Django Unchained is probably the most violently anti-white movie in like the history of the world, probably. It's like, I don't know, like a psychotic black Israelite wrote it or something. It's just a fantasy about murdering white people, but it still has good acting, a good story, good structure. It's entertaining. I can't say any of that for this movie at all. There's not even a story in this movie, The Many Saints of Newark. It's just nothing happens. Just one thing goes into another and it doesn't mean anything. This was supposed to be a prequel to The Sopranos and show Tony Soprano's origin story. It was advertised as like what made Tony Soprano and stuff. Tony Soprano is barely in the movie. He's like a side character and nothing happens with him. There's no growth. There's no arc. There's nothing. And you can't even say that it's just supposed to be like a standalone gangster movie that just happens to have characters that we know from the show or something like that. Because this movie can absolutely not stand on its own. In the first 5 minutes of the movie, they mention how Christopher Moltasanti was strangled to death by Tony Soprano, which is like a giant thing, killing off one of the main characters of the show in the 6th season of the show. So if you've never watched the show before and you go and watch this movie, you're going to be like, what are they even talking about? And then if you want to watch the show, you're going to know immediately that, oh, this is Christopher who dies, is going to end up dying now. Like, it's already spoiled for you. And that's another thing. Christopher Moltasanti is narrating this movie for some reason, and he's narrating it from hell. That's what he says at the end. He says, that's Tony Soprano. He's the reason I'm in hell. First of all, theologically, that's inaccurate. You're only in hell because you died in a state of mortal sin. Secondly, how are you narrating a movie from hell? Did the devil stop torturing you for a little bit to go and narrate a movie? Is that one of the requirements of hell, that like you have to also narrate a crappy movie about one of your family members or something? That was just bizarre. There's a lot of other bizarre stuff too that I'll get to in a second, but let me just compare this movie to El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, because El Camino was supposed to be like a sequel to Breaking Bad. It takes place right after Breaking Bad ends. And a lot of people didn't like that movie. I loved it. I thought it was awesome because I liked it for what it was. I looked at it as a conclusion of one of the characters that we didn't see a conclusion to in the show. It was basically like one final episode or an epilogue. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept me engaged, and I was intrigued enough in the movie while watching it that I could look past the fact that apparently Todd gained and lost 60 pounds in like a 5-month period. Plus, it had structure and went from point A to point B. Things led into each other. Jesse escapes the meth lab. Now he needs someplace to go and hide out, so he goes to his friend's house, who we know from the show, Badger and Skinny Pete. Now the cops are looking for him, and he needs to figure out a way to escape. So he's going to go to the disappearer guy that we know from the show. But he needs money, so he remembers where Todd from the show kept his money. So he goes and gets the money, but can only get half of the money because these other people are trying to get the money. That creates a conflict. Now he has to get the rest of the money, so on and so forth. And then that leads to him finally killing the guy, getting the money, and going to the disappearer and escaping to Alaska. Simple story, but it makes sense as a classic 3-act structure where you establish the characters and the setting, and then there's a conflict, and then you resolve the conflict. The Many Saints of Newark had none of that. Nothing leads into anything. Dickie's dad gets a new wife from Italy, and then he beats her up or pushes her down the stairs. So Dickie ends up killing his father. What happens because of that? Nothing. 0 consequences. Then Dickie starts having an affair with his father's widow. What comes of that? Nothing. No consequences. Dickie starts seeing his dad's brother, who is his twin brother, of course, because they wanted Ray Liotta in the movie more, I guess. He starts seeing him in prison and has this bizarre fantasy of him coaching a blind little league or something for no reason. No consequences, had nothing to do with anything. At one point he's talking to the dad and he's like, oh, I want a son so bad and my wife can't get pregnant. And then like Ray Liotta gives this like little speech about, oh, it's all about wanting or something like that. And like, it's supposed to be like inspirational or something. And I'm like, oh, is this going to be like how he develops his relationship with Tony Soprano because he can't have a son yet for some reason? Nope. Like the very next scene, it skips 5 years and he has a son. So what was the point of that whole like, oh, I just want a son so bad? Makes no sense. And then the black guy stops working for him and starts killing members of his crime family. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is what the plot's going to be about. This rivalry between the blacks and the Italians. Nope. There were so many times in this movie where things would happen. I'd be like, oh, maybe this is what the movie is going to be about. Maybe this is what the plot is. And it just never happened. And the main character is Dickie Moltasanti, who we've heard about in the show like a bunch of different times. It's Christopher Moltasanti's father. And like, if this was just like a character study or something of Dickie Moltasanti, then you could forgive there not being really a story. But in order for it to be a character study, the character should be interesting and have some type of growth or decline. There should be some type of changes or something interesting that makes you like attached to this character and makes you feel for them or makes them relatable or something. You look at films like Taxi Driver or Joker or American Psycho, it's about this character who just is like declining into insanity, and the stuff going on around him just contributes to that change. It's not really about what's going on around him. It's more about the changes we get to witness in the character, and it keeps us entertained and intriguing and what's going to happen next with this character. Dickie Moltasanti is the same exact character in the beginning to the end and faces no consequences for anything he does whatsoever, except for the ending when he gets killed. And in the show The Sopranos, there was this episode where Tony gets Christopher to kill the cop who killed his father. Now, everybody was always theorizing, oh, did that cop really kill Christopher's dad? Or maybe it was really Tony, or, you know, we don't know who really killed Christopher Moltasanti's dad. And even Christopher says in the show, it doesn't matter if you killed him or not, Tony wants you dead. And now in this movie, we still don't know who killed Dickie Moltasanti, but we know that Corrado Soprano ordered the hit, which makes no sense whatsoever. I don't think Corrado Soprano mentioned Dickie Moltasanti in The Sopranos one time throughout the entire series. And what was the reasoning that Corrado ordered the hit on Dickie Moltasanti? Because Corrado slipped on some stairs and Dickie Moltasanti laughed at him. So Dickie Moltasanti faces no consequences for murdering his father and then setting his body on fire and blaming it on black guys. He faces no consequences for drowning his mistress in the ocean in like broad daylight. Faces no consequences for any of the numerous horrible things he does as a criminal, but gets killed by Corrado Soprano, on the order of Corrado Soprano, because he laughed at Corrado when Corrado slipped. It was such a shoehorned thing that like just made absolutely no sense, and there was no payoff. It was so stupid. And Tony Soprano was like a side character in this movie. And the relationship between Tony and Dickie Moltasanti wasn't anything like Tony explained how it was in the show. Tony Soprano told Dr. Melfi that Dickie Moltasanti was how Tony is to Christopher to Tony. Basically how Dickie was Tony's mentor in the mob, like Tony is Christopher's mentor in the mob. And that's not how the relationship was in this movie at all. This whole movie, Tony has nothing to do with the mob whatsoever. The closest he comes is accepting a gift of stolen speakers from Dickie, and then he throws a hissy fit and throws them out the window because Dickie's not answering his phone calls. All of their other interactions was like about like Tony promising that he'll try to do better in school, and then this weird thing about trying to get his mother on antidepressants or something. It was so bizarre and meaningless. I felt like no connection to any character the entire movie. And speaking about bizarre, there's this scene in this movie where Johnny Soprano and his wife and Dickie Moltasanti and his wife are driving in this car, and they're talking about Tony or whatever, and Johnny Soprano's wife starts nagging about something, and Johnny Soprano pulls out a gun and shoots her through like the top of her hair, like she had like big hair or a hat or something like that, and he shoots her through the hair and leaves a bullet hole through her hat and her hair. Now, when I was watching this, I thought it was like a dream sequence or something like that because it was just so out of nowhere and nobody reacted. But no, it's actually supposed to have happened. He just shoots her through her hat or whatever, and there's barely any reaction, and she just looks at him like, really? Like, you're gonna shoot me through my hair? And he's like, oh, don't give me that look. Bro, you did not just do that, because if you just shot a gun in a packed tiny little sedan like that, your ears would be bleeding and everybody in the car would be bent over in pain. If you shoot a gun in a car, you're probably never hearing again. And also, what if like you hit a bump and then you like shot your wife in the head and just killed your wife for no reason? And that's another thing. It just had nothing to do with anything with the rest of the movie. It was just a bizarre scene. She gets shot through the hair and just gives him like this look of disapproval, like, and she was more mad at him and had a more genuine, like, angry reaction when he wasn't showing enough affection when he saw his surprise party. It just absolutely, people are not acting like humans in this movie, which is a far cry from the show, because the show was so realistic and people acted like my ex-girlfriend was a full-blown Italian American, and her, like I said in a couple of my other videos, her family acted exactly like the Sopranos act, like with that like overly flamboyant Italian American character. This movie was like a fever dream. I don't even know what this movie was. And I'm watching this movie and just random things keep happening and nothing's adding up. And then I look and there's only like 20 or 15 minutes left in the movie. And I'm like, oh wow, is there going to be like some major climax where everything connects and things finally come together and make sense? Or are they going to show Tony robbing that card game that they talked about in the show? Is something going to happen? Nope. It gets to this point where it seems like they're building up for this final conflict between the black crew and the Italian crew, and that just never transpires. Dickie talks to his uncle, his father's twin brother, in prison, and his uncle tells him that the best Christmas gift he can give Tony is to stay out of his life or whatever, which he does for like a total of a minute and a half of screen time or something, and then after he like has like a little pout and doesn't answer Tony's calls or answer the door, Syl tells him that, oh, he would be a good member of this thing of ours. And then he goes, okay, tell him to meet me at this ice cream shop or something. And then Dickie gets killed and Tony is waiting at the ice cream shop by himself. And then there's a funeral and that's the end of the movie. Okay. Now, maybe if this was meant to be the beginning of a trilogy or maybe just like a really long pilot episode for a new show or something, maybe I could forgive some of this stuff. But there is no excusable reason why this movie should be this bad. Oh my goodness. And some of the acting was atrocious. So I've been watching all of like the interviews and the advertisements coming up for this movie because I've been really excited for this movie. I don't really watch movies that much anymore because most movies are garbage now. The only good movies seem to be like from Korea now. But this was like the one movie that I was really excited about. So I was like watching all of the interviews and stuff, and they were saying like, oh, we really wanted to embody these characters and, you know, not just be some type of cheap imitation of them. We really wanted to get their mannerisms down and really make people believe that they were younger versions of these characters and blah, 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 blah. Bro, the guy who was playing Syl was like watching a bad Saturday Night Live skit. It was horrendous. It was like watching your friend get drunk and do impressions. It was really hard to watch. He does like the scowl or whatever, and then like does like a horrible impersonation with the weird voice, and like you could just tell like, dude, that's not how you talk. Oh, and we learned that Syl wears a wig and that's not his real hair, which they shove in our face like 15 times after it stopped being funny after like half a second. The first time you see Syl in this movie, he's bald, and then he's wearing the wig, and the wig keeps like flapping off and flying off, and they do that like 3 times where he keeps like fixing his hair and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, we get it. The guy playing Paulie was like a caricature too, like with the, oh, I gotta do my fingernails and stuff like that, like where they were just sensationalizing, I don't know if that's the right word, sensationalizing characteristics of the character to like an insane degree where they were just more subtle in the show. And I guess that comes with the territory because you have more time to develop characters and their attributes in a show. But it's like, come on, they could have done a little bit better. And the same thing with like Corrado. The actor wasn't horrible, I guess, but like he just said like lines from the show, and we're just supposed to be like, oh wow, it's just like the show. He said the line from the show where he said he never had the makings of a varsity athlete. They did stuff like that a lot too, like where they basically like shoehorned in references from the show instead of like making them naturally develop. Like at the end when Tony is in a phone booth and he's with a girl and he goes, hey Carmela, you got a dime? And we're supposed to be like, oh, that's Carmela, that's gonna be his wife. Yeah, let's just have literally one line of dialogue between them and not develop that at all and just call that fan service. And the only characters that actually resembled the characters from the show in a non-obnoxious way was the guy who was playing Big Pussy, but he only had like 3 lines. He had the voice down perfect and he barely did anything, but from the minimal screen time that he had, he was fine. And also the girl who is from like The Conjuring, I think, or something, one of those horror franchises, who was playing Tony's mom, she did a really good job, I think. But and Tony did okay, I guess, if you're just going for like who Tony was before he was like this criminal. He's just like this soft, nice teenager, I guess. He was fine. But literally everybody else was just super obnoxious. And if they weren't obnoxious, they were just forgettable. It was like, okay, whatever, like, you're just there. Another small thing that bothered me about this movie, which I probably wouldn't have even cared about if the rest of the movie was actually good, but there's like 3 times in this movie where there's fire in the scene and it just looks so fake. It looks like PS2 graphics or something, and it just totally took me out of the movie, especially when he lights Ray Liotta on fire and he just goes up and it looks like it's worse than like the Fantastic Four movie from like 2005 with the Flame On guy. Like it looks even worse than that, and it's just so bad. Totally took me out of the movie. It looks like some freshman who just learned how to work After Effects or something. Totally stupid. And the whole lighting of the movie is so bland and dark, and I don't know, it was just, it's like an ugly looking movie. I originally gave this movie a light 5, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's going between like a 3 and a 4. Probably a 3, because there's really almost nothing redeeming about this movie. Maybe, I guess you could say the like time period was kind of interesting, I guess, and they got, I guess, the aesthetics right. I guess the costume design department was okay. I guess you can give it some nostalgia points because we're back in this world, I guess, even though it's just pointless. But really, there's literally like nothing redeeming about this movie. It's so disappointing because it could have been so good. And there was no like, oh wow moments, you know. The closest thing that like came to something that was like, oh crap, was when Dickie Moltasanti murders his father. Like I wasn't expecting that, and I thought that was going to be the catalyst for the movie. Like I was saying, like there's so many times where you think, oh, this is what the movie's going to be about, and he murders his father and then lights him, drags him to like the factory or whatever and lights him on fire, and that's that. No consequences, has nothing to do really with the rest of the movie. and nothing happens. You can't even really, it's really call this a movie. It's not a character study. There's no 3-act structure. It's just literally just a bunch of loosely related scenes thrown together, and then it has like a bunch of subplots that mean nothing, like Dickie's mistress wanting to open up a hair salon that also nothing happens with that either, or Tony wanting to get his mother on these like antidepressant psycho meds or something, or the black guy suddenly becoming like a Black Panther type like radical or something. I don't know, it was just so weird. It fails as a Sopranos movie because it just makes a mockery of like well-known and beloved characters. It shoehorns in complete nonsense, and it doesn't answer any questions or really tie up any loose ends. And it fails just as a movie in general because there's no story. There's no character development or structure or anything. There's barely any entertainment value, or there's zero rewatchability. I don't think I ever want to see this movie again. They could have made this movie so good too. They could have made it about like the dichotomy between Johnny Soprano and Dickie Moltasanti, and how they were both father figures or mentors in Tony's life, and Tony is like struggling with like having like a path set out in life where he wants to go to college and be a football player or whatever, and his father is telling him to stay in school and do the right thing. Meanwhile, he's a criminal himself. And then you have like Dickie Moltasanti always cutting Tony in on schemes or something like that, and Tony is like stuck between these two worlds of like, should I follow in my family's path, or should I stay in college and be something different or whatever? And obviously we know what he chooses, but it would have been interesting to see how that process played out. And then you could have had like scenes where there was actual like a relationship built between Dickie and Tony of camaraderie and like a mentorship where he's showing him the ropes, showing him how to be intimidating or something, taking him on collections or whatever. And then they could have actually did real fan service and showed Tony and Jackie scheming to do that card robbery thing that they did when they like stuck up Feech's poker game. And they could have built off of that story of, you know, Dickie and Johnny maybe getting into a fight because, like, I don't know, Johnny finds out that Dickie was doing like schemes with Tony or something, and now they have to like come together to help Tony get out of this jam with the card game. I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but like there could have been actual structure and conflict and stuff. And if they didn't want to have Tony kill Dickie Moltasanti, which is fine, it would have been fan service to like see, oh, Tony killed Dickie, like we finally know after all of these years. The other, they could have either like left it ambiguous like they did and not shown anything, not shown who ordered the hit or whatever, or it would have made more sense if Paulie killed Dickie Moltasanti, because Paulie had like a really good father-son relationship with Christopher in the show, even arguably more so than Tony did. So if any of the known characters were gonna kill Dickie, it would have made more sense if it was Paulie. Oh, we're just gonna subvert expectations and shoehorn in that Corrado ordered the hit for literally some petty reason. No, you just don't understand art, bro. Like, in real life, things don't happen the way you expected, and just like real life, your expectations were subverted. It's like, yeah, but that's not story structure. This is a movie. I'm supposed to be entertained and intrigued, and you're using a property that I like and that I am a fan of, and you are destroying it. It's like that episode of South Park and Imagination Land where they bring all the directors in and like none of them can come up with story structure, and Michael Bay is just coming up with explosions and they're like, that's not story structure. And then M. Night Shyamalan comes in and he's like, oh, what if it turns out that the bad guys are actually intergalactic werewolves? And he's like, that's a twist, that's not story structure. And then Mel Gibson comes in and he's like, gives an actual like point A to point B arc that could actually lead somewhere, and they're like, oh, say what you will about Mel Gibson, but he knows story structure. That's what we needed for this film. We needed to actually get people who know how to make a story structure. And to fill in time, you could have had an interesting subplot of like Tony meeting Carmela and like going on their first dates and stuff like that. And then what would have been cool is like if when Tony is doing like some type of criminal stuff, like he has to give Carmela a gun to hide or whatever, which would show that like she knew what she was getting into from the start of their relationship, like it's alluded to in the show. That's what it should have been about. It should have been about Tony struggling with doing the right thing or following in his family's criminal footsteps and dealing with this or whatever, and it could have been great story and character and relationship development. Instead, we got this horrible nonsense. So yeah, definitely a 3 out of 10. If you watch The Sopranos, you kind of have to watch this movie just because you have to, because it's Sopranos, but like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, this is a 3 out of 10. And I usually, even movies that I don't like, I never really give less than a 5 unless it's super, super bad. And this movie is just, oh, such a disappointment. It just destroys the legacy of The Sopranos. If it doesn't destroy it. The Sopranos will always be a good show, but oh my gosh, like The Sopranos is one of the best shows of all time, and then they've released this horrible movie. I can't. I'm like, I don't care about movies. Like, I barely watch movies anymore. But this is like we can't have anything nice. This was one movie that I was looking forward to all year, and it's just so bad. I don't know if they're planning a new show or something, or if they're gonna make more movies. I can't picture any. All my friends that have seen this movie also said it was trash as well. Like, I watched it on my commute to work and during my breaks and stuff, and I finished before work was over. And on the carpool home, because my friend who carpools with me is also a big Sopranos fan, but he didn't want to watch it until he got home. And I was just biting my tongue, trying not to say anything. And then when he finished watching it, he immediately texted me, "That was horrible." So everything that I'm seeing so far from everybody says that it's horrible. So I don't know if they're going to even be able to make another movie or a show out of this or whatever, but I don't know. Part of me wants them to like try and fix this and try to like make something come out of this. I don't know how they possibly could, but the other part of me just wants them to just leave it alone. It's done with. Like, don't hurt it anymore. All right. So yeah, that's my review of The Many Saints of Newark. I did not enjoy it.